So greetings, everyone. My name is Emma Blessing. Thanks for joining us this Sunday for this virtual open studios with Jaime Keiter. Jaime has an art degree from UGA, and she's primarily a ceramic artist. Just a little bit of history. She's worked as a photo editor at fashion and design magazines for 15 years in New York before returning to Atlanta in 2016. And her ceramic art style has been inspired by Bauhaus design and Postmodern Memphis design, which was really fun for me to look into once I started doing some research on it. She creates these wonderful ceramic tiles and then collages them together to create larger works. Her art has been shown in Atlanta at a couple of places, at Poem 88, at Swan House, and then also in several publications, including Sight and Scene, Design Milk, Architectural Digest, and Vogue. So I'll go ahead and hand the floor over to Jaime. I know she has a presentation to do on her work.
Hi guys, I know some of you and I've shared some stuff with you, but it'll be nice to go through a little bit of a slideshow that I made, and then I have a few pieces here in person I can show you. But yeah, a little bit about me, continuing from Emma, is I was in New York for 15 years, and I was lucky enough to work in the photo industry, and I was just focusing on my professional career for a very long time. And when we moved back to Atlanta, I had a little bit more time, and I was lucky enough to give ceramics a try, and it just clicked and it worked, and I feel like I found my medium and kind of went with it. And I've explored a lot of different methods. I can walk you through them, and constantly like changing it up. And so that's where I am right now. So this first image is kind of shows the process. So what I do is I have two separate processes in a way, where this is just like a slab of clay rolled out, and then I cut it in different shapes and forms. Sometimes I do like super wavy, kind of random, sometimes geometric, straight lines, get out my ruler and measure. It really just depends on the day and how I'm feeling. And there's really no rhyme or reason to it. It just is what feels right. And if I don't like a shape, I cut it up, or I throw it out, or start over. So this is the process where I roll it out, cut it. These are drying right now. They dry on boards for a few days, and then I bisque them. And once I bisque them, then I glaze them. And then this is the next step, where I bring them to my studio, and I'm kind of constantly just like moving them around and trying new things. Like on the top here, I'm like, maybe I should do a white piece. I have all these nice white tiles that kind of work together, but then in a way, like I love all of these colors working together. The shapes on the bottom are kind of a little more organic, and sometimes I do organic shapes, sometimes I do geometric. So this is a huge part of my process, where I'm just moving tiles around. And sometimes I move tiles around for days, weeks, before I actually get anywhere that I like. So, it's a long process, and sometimes it happens right away, and sometimes it takes a bit. So that's where we are. So this is what I started on a few years ago. And this is kind of just taking these tiles and getting them to my studio and gluing them together and collaging them. So these are just glued together, kind of organic, loose, not framed, like very small. I don't know if you could see me, but this is the scale. They're small. So I had lots of fun with these, and it helped me like experiment with the shapes, which shapes were working, if organic worked with geometrics, the color palettes, and just kind of helped me create in a way that was simple enough that I could do it and move on quickly. But I was limited by scale, and so that kind of changed. I don't know, I wanted to go to the next place. These are just some details of those pieces, just experimenting with glazes. So this is where I was a few years ago. I introduced grout, and thus what I did changed to mosaic somehow, just using the word grout, which is kind of crazy because I consider myself like a collage artist, ceramic collage artist. But this is like a nice detail showing all the different glazes that I use. You know, sometimes like on the top, the black and white one is like a sponge paint, and then the other one is on the bottom right is like each individual piece of glaze, you know, layered on. And so this is just me kind of moving stuff around and putting them together. This is the first piece I think I did where I used grout and just started exploring. And then this was where I went. So this piece is pretty big. This is 18 by 24 or something. So I went from small to huge, like really quickly. And I like kind of love it. And I love the like randomness, and I love how it just comes together. And I didn't realize this was gonna happen, but the grout really like has such a presence and changes the piece itself. Because I went from light grout to dark grout, everywhere in between. I found a place that mixed Pantone colors, and I could do any grout that I wanted. And that was kind of exciting, and I could experiment with that. So this is from a few years ago. This is another example. These are carved, like some of these like lines are carved in. You kind of can't tell from this distance. And most of these are underglazed. So I do underglaze or regular, like, you know, overglaze, or, you know, regular commercial glazes that you can buy. So I do a little bit of both. Where I am now is I'm loving underglaze because it's matte, like the texture is matte, and it just does what I want it to do. It's more like paint. You can literally paint it on and it holds its form. It doesn't drip, it doesn't do anything. It's just like, it is what it is. The color changes slightly, but this one I did a couple years ago, and this was exploring a little bit of a still life vibe, which I had fun with. And okay, and then this is an example of where I went from random forms that I brought together later on in collage to this is actually a pre-composed piece. So I went to the studio and I had it all drawn out, and you can see like I mixed all of the paints together, all the underglaze, had everything figured out what I was gonna do, and put that together, which was fun. This is just a process shot of grouting the piece, and then this is the piece at the end. So it kind of shows that really, like, if you look at the colors here, they are true. You can see like they change slightly, but like the color is pretty much what you expect it to be. Whereas like some glazes, commercial glazes, you paint on and they're brown, and then they come out and they're totally different. So underglaze is just a little bit more predictable. So I love that. And then this is where I changed my clay body. I was using like a porcelain stoneware mix for the first couple of years I was doing this. And then I found this beautiful porcelain that's just like smooth, white, just like lovely. And so I couldn't bring myself to glaze it. Like it just felt perfect as is. So these came out and I didn't touch them. I brought them to the studio, I laid them out, and I did what I usually do, but it just feels like kind of whimsical and different. I don't know, but I love it. So I'm still using that clay body. And then this is also the same clay body, but I was sick of just like rolling out slabs and cutting. So I just like had to work with my hands, and it felt really fun to make shapes and make different, just like different objects, you know, like it changed from one-dimensional to two-dimensional to three-dimensional. And so that's where I went with this and started. And then when these came out of the kiln, I glazed them also with underglaze, so they're all matte, which is nice, and put them together on these huge forms that I made. These are just painted wood, and these are big. You can see in the picture I have an example of the size. And so these are where I am now, kind of. These are my quarantine pieces. And I was working from home. The studio was closed for, gosh, I don't know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that. And so I was home working on my deck in my backyard. And this is the first time that I kind of made them beforehand. Like I collaged them while I was making them, which was different for me and kind of a little tricky. On the one on the right, you can see all the tools I had. So I had like a knife, I had a brush, I had a couple of cookie cutters and a sponge. I mean, it was like very minimal. And for textures, I used some concrete, I used some things around my house to roll out some lines, but it was really loose and kind of fun and just pre-composed too, in that the pieces were kind of done a little bit when I brought them to the studio. So this is an example of one of them. You can kind of see it, I think, in the bottom right corner. So I brought it to the studio and glazed it and then inset it into this piece of wood that I cut out. And at first I thought it looked kind of lonely in there, so I splatter painted it and kind of like brought it all together. And I'm really happy with it. So that's kind of where I'm going right now. So in a way, quarantine helped me like expand and do new things, which I think is wonderful. Something good came out of quarantine. So that was exciting. And I wanted to show you, I can show you, this is another piece I did in quarantine. And this, I'm in the process of glazing. So I did underglaze right here and here, but I have to do the rest of it. But it's also, right now it's bisque. So it's ready to be underglazed, and then I will throw it in the kiln. It'll look a lot like the one I just showed you, you know? So it's a relief, and it's, I don't know, it's just something that I'm excited about. That's where I am right now. And this is another experiment I did recently. This is a piece that I made probably 3 years ago, and I had originally white grout in it, and it kind of got lost. Like there was something about it that didn't feel quite exciting enough. So about 3 months ago or something, I went in and I repainted the grout, changed it to black, and then it just like popped. It became like a different piece. So I'm excited. I'm experimenting with grout color. This is just another example of the carvings. So I don't know if you can see it. It's funny. It's like you carve it in the paint and you kind of can't see the relief, but you can feel it a tiny bit, but it's just like really, really subtle and really nice, just like different textures that you can make. And here's another like piece that is like the ones behind me, just like wanted to show you like a detail, but this is just like the moment when you're just kind of playing with the wet clay and having so much fun creating an object, you know? So it goes, so it's still, to me, each individual tile is a piece in itself. And then I go to process 2, where I kind of put them together and it creates the final piece. And so where I am now, like with this one, I'm super excited that it comes together before it is even fired. It can happen right away. I'm super excited about this. This is my new quarantine work. And yeah, so that's where I am right now, constantly exploring. I finally got my own kiln, which is here, and I adore it. And just like being at the Contemporary, having a studio here has been like such a blessing. And I just appreciate everyone so much. Yeah, I don't know if you have any questions. I went through that quickly.
I'm wondering about your color choices. Do you kind of base them on anything or limit your palette? Or I like your color choices. I'm just wondering how you arrive at them.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the underglaze is wonderful because like acrylic paint or like any sort of paint that painters use, you can see the color. You know, like I have some examples here, and I can just go and put them together and I'm like, oh, these are nice. Whereas like when you have a glaze, like some crazy stuff can always happen. So I love to kind of lay the colors out together and have them figured out beforehand. But also, like, my process, depending on the day, I glaze so many different ways and then come back and, you know, like the second slide I had kind of just showed all the options and then putting it together. So sometimes I don't even know what the color palette's going to be until I see them all together and kind of, and also like the pieces behind me, they're kind of blown out right now. I kind of can't see them. But there's some different ones where this is like blue and yellow, and then this one is nightshades. So, and I did like make these kind of knowing that they were going to be separate pieces in the same series. Yeah, so I planned them beforehand pretty much.
I have a question for you, Jamie. So where, like when you were talking earlier that about scale and, you know, having them kind of monumental or more monumental pieces behind you, like how big would you want to go? Because I can imagine your work's taking up like full, you know, murals and wall pieces that could really, you know, have multiple pieces and multiple kind of aspects that you could navigate. Like, do you imagine doing something in that scale?
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, I would love to do, yeah, I'd love to do a huge wall, you know, and that's also what's amazing about ceramic is it is like permanent and it's solid, you know, so it could be outside, it could withstand all sorts of conditions that like paintings or drawings on paper couldn't. So I feel like that's a huge opportunity. I haven't done it. These are the biggest I've gone, but sometimes when you put them together, you're like, oh, there's like a huge wall installation. So I've definitely considered it. And doing something outside interests me as well. So, but this is the largest scale I've done so far.
We have to find you a wall.
I know, seriously.
We do have a question from Lisa in the chat, and she was wondering, how hot do you fire?
Oh, these are all Cone 6. You know, underglaze is pretty flexible. It can go from a lot of temperatures, but Cone 6, I think that's the clay body I've always used, and that's what I fire to. It's pretty epic. But yeah, like underglaze is pretty flexible too. And for some things, I don't even bisque. I skip the bisque. I know, right? Crazy. If I'm just doing underglaze, I can just do it when it's still bone dry and then put it in and go straight to Cone 6. It's risky, but I've done it. Maybe I shouldn't admit that.
I love that because you were like, obviously we were with JD earlier, but that idea of the failure, right? And the fact that you kind of don't know what's going to happen, and that's a part of the process is that risk.
Oh, right. I mean, I think like of the tiles that I make, maybe 40% make them into an actual piece. I mean, the amount I like, you know, I mean, especially since I'm working at such a small scale, it's like everything is like an experiment. You know, everybody says like, you know, do a test and see if you like this glaze. But like all of my pieces are kind of a test because they're so small. I have less to lose, you know, so I kind of experiment. And because of that, I think I've used 100 different glazes since I've been working. And maybe 40 or 50 of them I still use, but it's an experiment. And yeah, clay's very tricky and it's finicky, but when it really works, it's amazing.
Jamie, I was wondering, it seems like you're pretty flexible about like changing, you know, you talked about the different glazes you use, or, you know, not using different pieces that you've made. It seems like you're not, you know, super attached to any one thing. It doesn't have to work out, which I know a lot of it comes from working with ceramics, which are hard and unpredictable. But I was just wondering, is that something you've had to kind of learn along the way? Is it just kind of how you are already and it just works with ceramics well? Or
yeah, I mean, I think that's my personality. I'm kind of easygoing. And in the beginning though, it was heartbreaking. Like I made so many pieces that I thought were going to come out, and then they came out of the kiln and the color was totally wrong, and it was heartbreaking. But I think I've been doing it long enough now to know that that happens all the time and it's okay, and you learn something. So it's kind of good sometimes to have mess ups because then you learn new stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for joining us, for showing your studio, Jamie. Thank you everybody for tuning in today.
Good. Thank you for coming, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.